They saw the fire before they saw the car. A strange glow lit the dirt road near Sapua, Burkina Faso. The smoke smelled of rubber, of fuel, and something worse. The villagers followed it, expecting a brush fire. What they found was a white Peugeot, burning, mangled, twisted. Inside were 4 bodies, unrecognizable, charred, slumped over each other in silence. One of them was Norbert Zongo. He was a journalist, an editor, a husband, a father. He had spent his life chasing truth, and now, the truth had caught up to him. No one tried to put the fire out. It burned all night. By morning, the car was a skeleton of metal and melted glass. Norbert Zongo wasn't just a reporter. He was the editor of El Independent, one of the few newspapers in Burkina Faso that dared to publish without fear. He named names. He pointed fingers. He asked questions people were warned not to ask. He was brave. And that made him dangerous. Zongo had uncovered corruption in ministries, abuses by military officers, and illegal deals linked to the presidency. But in December of 1998, he was investigating something even more sensitive: the death of a man named David Ouedraogo. David was a driver. Just a driver. But he worked for Blaise Compaoré, the president's younger brother. David was accused of theft. There was no trial. No hearing. He was taken to a military base, beaten, tortured, and killed. Zongo knew there was more to the story. And he was digging. His articles started circling Blaise Compaoré's name. He didn't make direct accusations. But in Burkina Faso, a journalist didn't need to. Just a headline was enough. The walls of power were starting to crack. And someone was getting nervous. On the morning of December 13, 1998, Norbert Zongo left Ouagadougou with 3 others. His younger brother, Ernest. His driver, Blaise. And his colleague, Blaise Compaoré. They were heading south, towards Sapua. Still working on the same story that had made enemies in high places. Zongo told friends he was close. He said, "If I don't make it back, you'll know why." No one took it seriously. They had heard him say things like that before. But this time, he was right. Hours later, in a dusty village just off the road, smoke rose into the air. Villagers followed the trail to a clearing. There, they saw a white Peugeot. Still smoldering. The glass was gone. The tires had melted. The doors were open, but blackened. Inside were 4 bodies. Burned. Twisted. Stacked together in silence. The villagers didn't scream. They didn't touch anything. They knew what they were seeing. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. Bullet holes were found in the car's frame. An accelerant had been used. Whoever did this wanted nothing left behind. No papers. No prints. No faces. The goal wasn't just to kill. It was to erase. To make sure the last story Norbert Zongo was writing never saw the light of day. The day after the fire, Burkina Faso woke up angry. Not confused. Not shocked. Angry. They had seen injustice before. But this was different. Norbert Zongo wasn't a criminal. He wasn't just a name in a story. He was their voice, the man who had written what they couldn't say out loud. And now, he was gone. Burned alive. Without justice. Without explanation. By mid-morning, Ouagadougou was already full of noise. Marches started outside his newspaper's old office. Then outside the palace. Then across universities, mosques, and market stalls. No leaders. No script. Just people. Thousands of them. Young. Old. Angry. They carried hand-drawn placards with torn corners. Justice pour Norbert Zongo. Non à l'impunité. Trop c'est trop. They didn't need hashtags. They had names. The chants echoed through the streets. "We are not afraid. We will not forget. Zongo lives." Reporters around the country stopped writing. Many joined the march. Teachers cancelled class. Radio stations played silence for 1 hour. The whole nation held its breath, waiting for someone at the top to speak. But from the presidency, nothing. No press conference. No interview. No apology. Not even a denial. They just watched, as tires burned, as windows cracked, as voices grew louder. State-run television broadcast music. Government newspapers ran stories about unity. Officials told citizens not to jump to conclusions. "Let the system work," they said. But everyone knew the truth. The system wasn't working. The silence wasn't neutral. It was protection. It was permission to forget, to erase, to bury a man's truth, and walk away. They called it an official investigation. But from the beginning, it felt like a funeral. Not just for Norbert Zongo, but for the truth. The government held press conferences. They promised a thorough inquiry. They appointed a special team, legal experts, military officers, ministry aides. It looked impressive on paper, but on the streets, people weren't fooled. They had seen this before. Behind the scenes, evidence began to vanish. The car was removed before all samples were taken. Witnesses were interviewed, but their statements disappeared from the final report. Photos from the crime scene were incomplete. The only thing that was clear was that nothing would be. A few Presidential Guard officers were brought in for questioning. For a moment, it looked like something real might happen. Some of them had ties to David Ouedraogo's torture, the case Zongo was chasing before he died. But within weeks, they were released. No charges. No hearings. No consequences. One by one, the names in the file were redacted. Then the file itself began to shrink. Less detail. Less urgency. Less everything. Journalists who asked questions were warned to let it go. One reporter received a blank envelope with a burnt match inside. Another was trailed home for 3 nights before quitting the investigation. Even inside Zongo's own newsroom, the place he built, people stopped writing. A quiet fear spread. It was as if Zongo's death had cast a long shadow. And standing in it could get you burned too. By 2001, the protests had faded. The headlines had moved on. Zongo's widow still asked questions. But the government had stopped answering. In 2006, the inquiry was officially closed. The reason? Lack of evidence. But people knew the truth. This wasn't a failure. It was a decision. Zongo's case wasn't dropped because they couldn't solve it. It was dropped because they didn't want to. And just like that, the truth was buried. Years passed. The protests faded. Zongo's name stopped appearing in headlines. His killers walked freely. And Burkina Faso tried to move on. But some fires never go out. They smolder beneath the surface, waiting for oxygen. In 2014, the oxygen came. It started with students, then workers, then everyone. The same streets that had once filled with candles and chants for Norbert Zongo, filled again. This time, they carried something different: fury. President Blaise Compaoré had ruled for 27 years. He was untouchable, unbothered, silent. But on that day, silence wasn't enough. Protesters marched to the palace gates. They set fire to Parliament. They shouted Zongo's name like it was a warning, or a reckoning. And by nightfall, Compaoré was gone, exiled, running from the country he claimed to lead. That day, something shifted. Zongo's file, long buried, was pulled from the archives. The case was reopened. Investigators dusted off old evidence. There was no celebration, just cautious hope. Then came 2017. Burkina Faso issued a warrant for Francois Compaoré, the president's brother, the man Zongo had been investigating when he died. Francois was living in France, untouched, wealthy, protected, but the ghosts had followed him. International pressure mounted. Human rights groups demanded justice. Journalists published op-eds, petitions spread. In 2022, the French government approved his extradition. The headlines read, "Justice for Zongo." His widow wept. "Maybe now," she said, "our children will believe again." But hope has its own kind of silence. As of today, there is no trial, no court date, no courtroom testimony. Francois Compaoré is still in France, still free. His lawyers delay. French court stall. Years pass. Every December 13th, Zongo's widow lights a candle. His children, grown now, attend memorials with quiet eyes. His newsroom is gone. His desk, empty. And on walls across Ouagadougou, his name remains. Faded, but unforgotten. A name burned into the soul of a country that still has no answers. Only waiting. They thought burning his body would burn the story, that turning flesh to ash would scatter the truth across the red dirt of Sapua, never to be seen again. But truth does not vanish in smoke, it lingers in the air, choking those who try to forget. Norbert Zongo didn't carry a gun, he carried a pen, and somehow, that terrified them more than any weapon, because his pen had a target, and it was pointed at power. He was not a rebel with bullets, he was a rider with boldness, a man who didn't just question corruption, he cracked it open and exposed its stench to the world. And for that, they sent fire, not justice, not dialogue, not law. They sent fire to erase a question they were too afraid to answer. Who gave the order? For men were lost that day. Zongo, his brother, his friend, his driver. Not by accident, not in war, but by design. Their silence was purchased in blood. For over 26 years, Burkina Faso has lived in that silence, a silence padded by politics, protected by power, and dressed up in the language of delay. His wife wakes with grief carved into her bones. His children bear a last name louder than most living voices. His mother went to her grave with tears that still ask why. No trial, no confessions, no consequences. Only dusty files, hollow statements, and a nation pretending the sky isn't filled with smoke. But the name Norbert Zongo has refused to lie still. It walks through the streets of Ouagadougou, it stands in newsrooms across Africa, it whispers in every fearless question. They thought they buried a man, but they planted a resistance, because now, truth carries his name, and silence can't sleep. He became more than a journalist. He became a ghost they cannot silence, a shadow that stretches over every courtroom, every microphone, every coward in a suit. And maybe that's the justice they fear most. Not revenge, not prison, but the unbearable weight of being remembered by the people they failed to break. We still ask what they tried to bury. Who gave the order, who kept the files hidden, who profited from the silence, and who still walks free with blood on their hands? Because somewhere, a voice still knows. A whisper still trembles on the edge of someone's guilt, and one day, that whisper will break the surface. Zongo may be gone, but he taught us this. Truth doesn't need permission to rise, and buried questions eventually grow teeth. This is no longer just about a journalist. It is about what a country does with its ghosts, how a continent remembers its wounds, and how silence becomes a second crime. We don't just mourn Norbert Zongo. We study him, we invoke him, and we follow his trail through the fog of fear they hoped would blind us. To the men who plotted his death, your secret is not safe, your power is not permanent, and your clock is ticking beneath the soil you thought would hide it all. Tick, tick, tick. This is vanished Africa. We dig where truth was buried, we speak where silence was sold, and we ask what the world was told to forget. Subscribe. Stay with us. Because we are not done. And buried truth does not rest. It waits for the right storm. And then it rises. Louder than the fire that tried to kill it, bolder than the fear that tried to contain it. and stronger than the silence that still dares to hold its breath.